The rain hit Marcus Thorne's camera like bullets of ice, each drop threatening to seep through his weather-sealed equipment. He cursed under his breath, clutching his prized telephoto lens closer to his chest. The mountain weather had turned violent without warning, transforming his peaceful wildlife photography expedition into a desperate scramble for shelter. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the treacherous path ahead. In that brief flash, Marcus spotted what looked like a dark opening in the mountainside, perhaps 50 yards up the slope. Another crack of thunder made his decision for him. Camera gear was expensive, and hypothermia wasn't on his bucket list. The climb was treacherous, his boots sliding on wet rocks and loose scree. Twice he nearly lost his footing, heart pounding as he imagined tumbling down the mountain with 30 pounds of camera equipment. The cave entrance appeared smaller up close, but it was deep enough to offer proper shelter from the storm. Marcus switched on his headlamp and ducked inside, relieved to feel the temperature difference. The air was surprisingly warm for a mountain cave, carrying an odd metallic scent he couldn't quite place. As he moved deeper, checking for any signs of wildlife that might object to his presence, his light caught something that made him freeze. The cave wall ahead sparkled with an impossible pattern of lights, like a constellation had been painted in phosphorescent paint. But these lights moved, pulsing with a rhythm that reminded him of breathing. His photographer's instincts kicked in, and he reached for his camera before common sense could object. The click of his shutter echoed through the cave, and that's when he heard it, a sound like wind chimes in a gentle breeze, but with an underlying electronic tone that sent shivers down his spine. His light beam swung toward the source, and Marcus forgot how to breathe. She stood nearly 7 feet tall, her skin resembling polished platinum with hints of iridescent colors that shifted like oil on water. Her eyes were the most striking feature, 3 of them, arranged in a triangle, each one containing what looked like swirling nebulae. She wore what appeared to be a form-fitting suit made of living metal, portions of it glowing with the same rhythm as the cave walls. Marcus's first thought wasn't to run. Instead, he found himself lowering his camera and saying, "I am so sorry about the flash. I should have asked first." The absurdity of apologizing to an alien for poor photography etiquette almost made him laugh. The being's head tilted at an angle that seemed just slightly too far for human anatomy. When she spoke, her voice carried that same wind chime quality he'd heard before, but formed perfectly clear English words. "Your apology is accepted, photographer Marcus Thorne." He blinked, wondering if hypothermia had already set in and this was all a hallucination. "You know my name? Your images are tagged with it in multiple Earth databases. I have been studying your work." She gestured to the cave walls, and Marcus realized the patterns weren't random, they were recreations of his wildlife photographs, rendered in living light. "I'm flattered," he managed, "though I have to admit, this is a first for my portfolio review sessions." The alien's 3 eyes sparkled in what he hoped was amusement. "I am Vera, xenobiologist of the Stellar Sciences Academy. And I require your assistance." She moved closer, and Marcus noticed for the first time that she was favoring her right side. What he had taken for decorative patterns in her suit were actually cracks, and a fluid that glowed like liquid moonlight was seeping through them. "Are you hurt?" he asked, professional curiosity overriding his shock. He'd photographed injured wildlife before and recognized the signs of an animal in distress, even in an alien form. "My landing was less graceful than intended," Vera admitted. "The storm interfered with my ship's guidance systems. The vessel is safely hidden, but my containment suit was damaged. Without it, Earth's atmosphere will become toxic to me within 48 of your hours." Marcus set down his camera bag, mind racing. "Okay, that's a lot to process. But first things first, what do you need to repair it?" Vera's eyes pulsed with a soft light. "You are not afraid?" "Oh, I'm terrified," Marcus assured her with a small laugh. "But you've been studying my work, which means you're interested in Earth's wildlife. Anyone who appreciates nature can't be all bad in my book." Besides, he added, gesturing to the storm outside, it's not like I have anywhere else to be. The patterns on the cave walls shifted, forming new images, complex diagrams that Marcus recognized as technical schematics. The repairs require materials I cannot safely gather in my current state. And there are complications. There always are, Marcus said, pulling out his emergency kit. But let's start with what we can fix right now. Then you can tell me about these complications while we work on the rest. Thunder boomed outside, but within the cave, Vera's lights pulsed steady and strong. As Marcus began laying out his supplies, he couldn't help but smile. He'd come to these mountains hoping to photograph rare wildlife. Instead, he'd stumbled into the rarest encounter of all, and somehow, he knew this was just the beginning of a much bigger story. The sunrise painted the cave walls in shades of amber and rose, but Marcus's attention was fixed on something far more extraordinary. Vera's 3 eyes had projected a holographic map of the solar system, filling the cave with pinpoints of light that danced like fireflies. Her silver skin reflected each star, turning her into a living constellation. Your world sits at a crucial junction, she explained, her wind chime voice echoing softly. A crossroads between several spacefaring civilizations. Her hands moved through the projection, causing the stars to shift and swirl. Many are watching, waiting to see which path humanity will choose. Marcus adjusted his position on the damp cave floor, careful not to disturb the delicate equipment he'd laid out to dry. And what paths are those exactly? Some believe your species will self-destruct, Vera said, her eyes dimming slightly. Others think you'll reach the stars but bring your conflicts with you. A few. She paused, her skin rippling with patterns that seemed almost hopeful. A few of us see something different. What do you see? The hologram shifted, showing Earth from orbit. Marcus caught his breath at the sight of his home planet, gleaming like a marble of blue and white. We see a species that continues to survive despite its flaws. That creates beauty even in darkness. That learns from its mistakes, however slowly. Marcus thought about his own work, the years he'd spent documenting Earth's vanishing wilderness, trying to show people what they stood to lose. We're trying, he said softly. Not all of us, but enough. Yes. Vera's form brightened. That is why I came. My research suggests that humanity's relationship with Earth's biosphere, while complex, is teaching you lessons crucial for space exploration. The way you struggle to balance progress with preservation, technology with nature, these experiences are shaping you in unique ways. A sudden beeping interrupted her explanation. One of the devices on her suit pulsed with urgent red light. Vera's form tensed, her silver skin darkening to a stormy gray. What is it? Marcus asked, already reaching for his gear. A ship has entered orbit, she said, her voice tight. Not one of mine. The hologram shifted, showing a new point of light descending through Earth's atmosphere. The harvesters have found me sooner than expected. Harvesters? They see developing worlds as resources to be claimed, not civilizations to be nurtured. Her 3 eyes fixed on Marcus with an intensity that made him shiver. They want my research destroyed. If they succeed, Earth will be classified as unclaimed territory, open for exploitation. Marcus stood, slinging his camera bag over his shoulder. Then we don't let them succeed. What's the plan? Vera studied him for a moment, her form rippling with surprise. You would help me? Knowing the danger? You're trying to protect my world, Marcus said simply. Seems like the least I can do is return the favor. He grinned, patting his camera. Besides, I've spent years tracking elusive subjects. How different can alien hunters be? A sound like crystal wind chimes filled the cave, Vera's laugh. Very different, she said, but her form had brightened again. But your skills may prove useful. My ship is hidden in a valley 5 kilometers north. If I can reach it, I can transmit my findings to the Science Council before the harvesters interfere. 5 kilometers through mountain terrain. Marcus pulled out his satellite phone, checking the topographic map. That's not so bad. I know these trails better than anyone. The harvesters have technology that can track my energy signature, Vera warned. And they will not hesitate to eliminate witnesses. Marcus was already plotting their route, marking areas of cover and potential vantage points. Good thing I'm not planning on being witnessed then. He looked up at her with a determined smile. Ready for a crash course in wildlife photography? Rule 1. Sometimes the best way to not be seen is to hide in plain sight. Vera's form shifted, adapting to show interest. Explain. And so, as the morning sun climbed higher and unseen ships prowled the skies above, Marcus began teaching an alien scientist the art of blending in, never suspecting that these lessons would soon mean the difference between life and death. They moved through the mountain forest like shadows, stopping only when Marcus raised his fist, a signal Vera had quickly learned meant danger. The morning had aged into afternoon, bringing with it a thick blanket of clouds that threatened more rain. Perfect cover, if not for the otherworldly hum that periodically filled the air. 2 kilometers to the next ridgeline, Marcus whispered, consulting his map. Then we'll have a clear view of your ship's valley. Vera nodded, her form currently mimicking the dappled patterns of sunlight through leaves. She had proven to be an excellent student of camouflage, her alien biology allowing her to adapt in ways that put Earth's chameleons to shame. A distant crack echoed through the trees, too sharp to be thunder, too deep to be human. Marcus pressed himself against a tree trunk, feeling Vera do the same beside him. Moments later, a section of forest simply vanished, replaced by a perfectly cylindrical hole that stretched from canopy to forest floor. Molecular disassembler, Vera explained, her voice barely a whisper. They're scanning for my energy signature. How accurate are these scans? Accurate enough to detect a single cell of my kind. Marcus processed this, watching as another section of forest disappeared. But they can only scan in straight lines, right? Like radar? Correct. The energy cost of curved scans would be, she stopped as understanding dawned in her 3 eyes. The curvature of the land. Exactly. Marcus grinned. They're thinking like machines, scanning in a grid. But this is wild country. The terrain doesn't work that way. He pointed to a deeply carved ravine ahead. If we follow the natural contours, stay in the shadows of the ridges. Their scans will pass over us, Vera finished, her form rippling with admiration. They moved carefully, using every fold and wrinkle in the landscape to their advantage. Marcus found himself drawing on years of tracking experience, but with a twist. Instead of following animals, they were following the land itself, reading its story to stay hidden. The strategy worked until they reached the river. What should have been a gentle mountain stream had become a raging torrent from the previous night's storm. The ford Marcus had planned to use was underwater. We'll have to find another way, he said, but Vera was studying the water intently. The molecular scanners, she said slowly, they cannot penetrate more than 2 meters of moving water. The molecular chaos creates too much interference. Marcus looked at the churning river, then at the increasingly frequent disappearance of forest sections around them. How long can you hold your breath? I don't breathe as you do, Vera replied. But you cannot survive underwater long enough to. She stopped as Marcus pulled a small device from his camera bag. What is that? Emergency rebreather. Never go mountain shooting without one. Lets me get those underwater waterfall shots everyone loves. He checked its gauge. 30 minutes of air, maybe 40 if I'm careful. A new sound cut through the air, a high-pitched whine that set Marcus's teeth on edge. Vera's form rippled with alarm patterns. They're switching to broad-spectrum scanning, she said. We have minutes at most. Marcus was already securing the rebreather. Then let's not waste them. Can you handle the current? In response, Vera's form shifted, becoming streamlined, her silver skin taking on properties that reminded Marcus of seals and otters. I will ensure you are not swept away, she promised. The water was shockingly cold, but Marcus forced himself to focus on his breathing, on the firm grip of Vera's transformed hand guiding him through the current. They let the river's flow carry them downstream, using far less energy than fighting across it. When they finally surfaced, nearly a kilometer downriver, the scanning beams had fallen far behind. But they weren't celebrating yet. The delay meant they'd have to cross exposed ground to reach Vera's ship before sundown. We'll need a diversion, Marcus said as they caught their breath in the shelter of an overhanging bank. Something big enough to draw their attention. Give us a clear run to your ship. Vera's form had returned to its normal configuration, but her eyes were troubled. What you suggest is extremely dangerous. More dangerous than molecular disassembly? A sound like chimes in a storm, her version of a worried laugh. Perhaps not. She reached into a compartment in her suit and withdrew a small cylinder that seemed to bend light around it. This is a quantum beacon. Normally used for emergency navigation. If activated, it will create a signal they cannot ignore. Perfect. We'll set it up on that far ridge, let them chase their own tails while we... Marcus stopped as Vera shook her head. It must be carried. The signal degrades too quickly otherwise. Marcus stared at the device, understanding dawning. You mean one of us has to play bait? I cannot ask you to. Good thing you're not asking. Marcus held out his hand for the beacon. I know these mountains. I can keep them busy long enough for you to reach your ship and transmit the data. If they catch you. They won't. He managed a confident smile. I've spent years not being seen when I don't want to be. Besides, your research is what matters. Earth's future depends on it getting through. Vera was silent for a long moment, her 3 eyes swirling with emotion. Finally, she pressed the beacon into his hand. You continue to surprise me, Marcus Thorne. Yeah, well. He secured the beacon to his belt. That's kind of our species thing. He checked his map one last time, memorizing the terrain. Give me a 15-minute head start, then make your run for the ship. And Vera? Yes? Make sure your report mentions how photogenic we humans can be. Might help our case. That crystal chime laugh again, but this time with warmth instead of worry. I will include extensive documentation of human aesthetic appeal. As Marcus prepared to leave their shelter, he found himself grateful for every hard lesson the mountains had taught him. He was about to put them all to the test, playing a game of hide and seek where the stakes were higher than he'd ever imagined. But looking at Vera, seeing the hope in her alien eyes, he knew it was worth the risk. Sometimes the best photographs came from putting yourself in dangerous places. And sometimes, he was learning, the same was true of saving the world. The quantum beacon pulsed against Marcus's hip as he ran through the gathering dusk, its alien warmth a constant reminder of what was at stake. Behind him, the sounds of pursuit echoed through the mountains, mechanical whirs and crystalline tones that had no place in this ancient wilderness. He had led the harvesters on a winding chase through the most treacherous terrain he knew, using every trick learned from years of tracking elusive wildlife. But now, as the light faded and his strength began to wane, he faced a decision that would change everything. His satellite phone buzzed, a message from Vera, encoded in the simple pattern they had established. 3 quick vibrations, she had reached her ship. 2 long ones, the data transmission was beginning. 1 final pulse, a warning. The harvesters had split up. Marcus crouched behind a fallen log, catching his breath while studying his map. The quantum beacon was working too well, its signal growing stronger instead of degrading as they had hoped. He could feel the device changing, becoming something more than it was meant to be. The cold truth settled over him like the evening mist, this wasn't just a distraction anymore. It was becoming a target. His phone buzzed again. Vera's message was urgent, beacon unstable. Quantum resonance building. They will not stop pursuing. Marcus looked up at the darkening sky, understanding dawning. The harvesters weren't just chasing him, they were driving him. Herding him toward something. And the beacon was leading him right to it. He typed back, "How long for full transmission?" The response came quickly, 20 minutes. But Marcus, the beacon's instability, it's drawing power from nearby quantum fields. In English, please. It's becoming a quantum singularity. If they catch you, they'll use it to erase everything in a 10-kilometer radius. All evidence. All witnesses. Marcus absorbed this, feeling strangely calm. Including their own people? They're connected to their ships. They'll survive. Nothing else will. The choice crystallized in his mind with the clarity of a perfect photograph. The harvesters were so focused on erasing evidence that they had forgotten what humans did best: adapting, surviving, turning weakness into strength. "Vera," he typed, "your ship's shields. They protect against quantum effects?" "Yes, but..." A pause. "No. Marcus, it's too dangerous. You said 20 minutes for transmission. What if I bring them to you? The shields cannot protect both of us and maintain the transmission. The quantum effects would. Just me, then. You focus on the transmission. I'll handle the rest." Another pause, longer this time. "There must be another way." Marcus smiled, touching the warm beacon at his hip. "You said you came here to study humanity. Well, here's your chance to see what we do best: improvising." He didn't wait for her response. Standing, he began running again, but this time with purpose. Not away from the harvesters, but toward Vera's ship. Toward the one place that could contain what the beacon was becoming. The pursuit intensified as if they sensed his change in direction. Beams of molecular disassembly carved through the forest around him, turning matter into memory. But Marcus had spent his life learning to read landscapes, to find the hidden paths that others missed. Every ravine and ridge became a tool, every shadow an ally. As he ran, he thought about all the endangered species he'd photographed, all the vanishing places he'd tried to preserve through his lens. Each image was a fight against erasure, a struggle to keep something precious from being lost forever. Now he was running to preserve something even bigger: humanity's chance to find its own path to the stars. The beacon grew warmer, its pulse synchronizing with his racing heart. Above, the clouds parted just enough to show the first evening stars, silent witnesses to what would come next. The clearing where Vera's ship lay hidden was a battlefield of light and shadow. The harvesters' vessels hung in the air like tears in reality, their impossible geometries hurting Marcus's eyes. Between them, barely visible through its cloaking field, Vera's ship pulsed with the rhythm of transmitting data. The quantum beacon at his side had become almost too hot to touch, its light bleeding through his clothes like captured starfire. As Marcus burst into the clearing, he saw Vera through the ship's translucent hull, her 3 eyes wide with alarm. "Don't stop the transmission," he shouted, though he wasn't sure she could hear him. "Whatever happens, don't stop." The harvesters emerged from their vessels, towering figures of crystalline machinery and flowing metal, beautiful in their alien perfection. Their voices filled the air with sounds like breaking glass and bending light. "The beacon," one of them said in fractured English, the words seeming to cut through the very air. "Surrender it, and your death will be swift." Marcus reached for the device, but instead of handing it over, he held it up like a trophy. "You want it? Better hurry. I don't think it's feeling very stable." The quantum beacon was transforming in his hands, its surface flowing like quicksilver, its light becoming a void that swallowed shadow. The harvesters moved forward, their perfect forms showing the first signs of concern. "You cannot control it," another said. "The quantum cascade will." "Control it?" Marcus laughed. I'm counting on not controlling it. That's another thing about humans you should have studied. Sometimes our best move is letting go. With every ounce of strength he had left, Marcus threw the beacon. Not at the harvesters, but straight up, into the space between their ships. For a moment, it hung there like a new star being born. Then reality buckled. The quantum cascade began at the beacon's core, rippling outward in waves of unlight that bent space itself. The harvesters' ships tried to flee, but the very void they had meant to use as a weapon now held them fast. Marcus ran for Vera's ship, feeling reality tearing itself apart behind him. The clearing was becoming a maelstrom of quantum effects, a storm of unmaking that threatened to erase everything it touched. He reached the ship's shield just as the cascade reached its peak. Through the barrier, he saw Vera's form rippling with patterns of concern and determination as she maintained the transmission. Outside, the harvesters and their ships were being drawn into the quantum singularity they had helped create, their perfect forms dissolving into probability and possibility. Then, just as suddenly as it began, it was over. The quantum storm collapsed in on itself, taking the harvesters with it and leaving behind nothing but a perfect circle of untouched earth, as if that section of reality had simply decided to start over. The shield around Vera's ship shimmered and fell. She emerged, her silver skin glowing in the dusk light. The transmission is complete. Earth will be protected. Marcus nodded, suddenly exhausted. Good. That's good. He looked at the empty clearing. Did we just create a paradox or something? Something. Vera's voice held a note of wonder. You turned their weapon against them by refusing to play by their rules. It was very human of you. Thanks. I think. He sat down heavily on a fallen log. So what happens now? Some kind of memory wipe to protect Earth's development? But Vera was shaking her head, her 3 eyes swirling with new colors. The Science Council's response was unexpected. Your actions, your willingness to risk everything to protect both your world and my mission, it has challenged our assumptions about humanity's readiness for contact. Meaning? Meaning they want to try something new. Instead of erasing this encounter, they want to study it. To learn from it. She moved closer, her form shifting with excitement. If you are willing, you would be Earth's first official cultural ambassador to the stars. Your photographs, your experiences, they would help us understand humanity in ways our distant observations never could. Marcus stared at her, his tired mind trying to process this change in fate. You mean? I get to keep my memories? And take more pictures? Yes. Her form brightened. Though we should probably keep the quantum physics to a minimum. Marcus laughed, feeling lighter than he had since this all began. Deal. But I have one condition. Yes? He pulled out his camera, somehow still intact after everything. We recreate that first moment in the cave. When I first saw you. I want to remember it properly this time, not as the day I had to forget, but as the day everything changed. Vera's form shifted into that initial configuration, her bioluminescence painting the gathering dark with stellar light. Earth's first official interstellar photograph? Something like that. Marcus raised his camera, feeling the familiar thrill of capturing something extraordinary. Say cheese. Or whatever they say in your part of the galaxy. As the shutter clicked, the first stars became visible through breaks in the clouds. Somewhere up there, Marcus knew, decisions were being made about Earth's future. But down here, in a clearing that had seen the impossible, 2 beings from different worlds were learning that sometimes the best pictures were the ones you never expected to take. And somewhere in the mountains, rain began to fall again, nature's quiet reminder that every great story moves in cycles, and the best endings are really just new beginnings in disguise.